Welcome to Hominid History Hub. Tonight, you step quietly into a world rarely seen, a world where every shadow could teach a lesson older than memory itself. Imagine a valley carved by rivers that no longer run, hills that held the footsteps of creatures whose names have faded, and caves that whispered the first lullabies of life under endless stone. Here, children moved with cautious awareness, learning not from words but from the cadence of the land, the subtle warnings of wind through brittle branches, the sudden crack of ice or stone. Their days were measured not by hours, but by the rhythm of survival, and in every gesture there was instruction, every glance a lesson. They watched, they mimicked, and they learned to anticipate the unseen, the enormous, the patient dangers that prowled unseen, waiting for a misstep. The smallest human hand could mean the difference between life and absence, and these children knew it instinctively. There was no indulgence here, no room for carelessness, only the quiet imprint of observation, repetition, and internalized fear that became second nature. As the wind tore across frozen valleys, and the sun cast long shadows that bent across stone floors of caves, they moved with a grace born of necessity. They understood early that nothing here belonged solely to them, that every sound, every movement could mark the boundary between safety and catastrophe. Yet in this world of quiet terror, there was also profound connection. Small groups clustered together, sharing warmth, sharing glance, sharing subtle instruction through touch and presence. The elders, the ones whose experience had tempered panic into calculation, allowed glimpses of the world's order to seep into the children's understanding. Through mimicry and the careful repetition of tasks, the young learned how to track the subtle signs of predators, how to identify safe terrain versus treacherous ground, and how to anticipate the pattern of seasons before those patterns fully revealed themselves. Every day was a curriculum in vigilance, every hour a testament to adaptation. In the shadowed hollows of caves, children discovered the texture of stone and the sound of dripping water, learning to map their surroundings not only with eyes, but with memory that stretched beyond the immediate moment. They were taught how to handle simple tools, how to strike, how to chip, how to prepare, always under the quiet supervision of those who had survived years longer and carried the heavy archive of knowledge embedded in their posture, their gestures, their measured breathing. The lessons were not loud. There was no declaration. Knowledge was absorbed through atmosphere, through proximity, through the subtle resonance of movements repeated in quiet rhythm. And in this intense attentiveness, children developed foresight, intuition, and a deep sensitivity to danger that no book could teach, no story could fully convey. The cold did not merely touch the skin. It was a teacher, a sculptor of understanding. The presence of predators, unseen yet unmistakably sensed, framed their awareness. Even the slightest wind carrying the distant echo of large footsteps was a signal to stop, to crouch, to listen. They learned patience in moments measured by the shift of light and shadow, in moments measured by the faint stir of animals on distant hills. Their world was one of quiet urgency, where every experience was etched into their growing minds, where every observation could save a life, and where the echoes of lessons absorbed now would ripple across years yet to come. Even laughter, when it emerged, was tempered by the knowledge that safety was never guaranteed. And so these children moved, listened, learned, and adapted, absorbing the wisdom of their elders and the caution of the land itself, threading a fragile path through a world that demanded both fear and understanding, shaping minds capable of carrying the weight of survival, intuition, and the quiet knowledge that life was, always, a careful balance between curiosity and caution. In the silence of those ancient valleys, in the deep echo of wind through stone and ice, the first stories of resilience, awareness, and human caution were being written, etched not on paper, but in the attentive movements of those who would inherit the land, and in their understanding of what it truly meant to be alive in a world that waited silently to test them. Theirs was a curriculum of shadows, a lesson of patience, a heritage of the senses sharpened by danger, and a profound recognition that every moment, however small, mattered beyond measure. And as these lessons accumulated in silence, the children began to understand not only the immediate dangers, but the patterns that governed their world. Each sound of cracking ice, each shift of wind across frozen plains, each distant cry of a predator became part of an intricate map in their minds, an invisible chart of threats and opportunities. They learned to read the terrain in ways that went far beyond the visible, tracing the faintest depressions in snow or the subtle alteration of light across rock to determine where water might pool or which slope might collapse under weight. Every day offered new tests, small and vast, and through repetition, observation, and careful imitation, their understanding of survival deepened. They observed their elders handling tools with deliberate care, noticing how stone could be shaped to cut, scrape, or hunt, how fire could be coaxed from friction, how the simplest arrangement of sticks and hide could offer warmth and protection against the biting cold. Knowledge was rarely verbal. It was transmitted through shared action, through gesture and posture, through the rhythm of repeated routines that became instinct. Even when alone, the children's minds remained vigilant, anticipating dangers, rehearsing the lessons learned in silence. The landscape itself seemed to demand constant attention. A seemingly empty valley might conceal a pack of wolves. A distant shadow on a hillside might mask the approach of a predator larger than any they had seen. The lessons of fear were also lessons of calculation. They discovered that the faintest pattern, once recognized, could guide them safely across expanses that would otherwise be perilous. And over time, their senses sharpened in ways impossible to replicate by mere instruction. Their hearing became attuned to the faintest disruption of snow or leaf, their eyes capable of discerning subtle differences in light and color that indicated movement or hidden obstacles. Their memory, both visual and tactile, grew formidable, each day layered upon the previous, forming a complex internal atlas of the land, of safe passage, and of the behavior of creatures both known and imagined. They began to recognize signs of other human groups, distant signals of cooperation, conflict, or shared resource gathering, noting patterns of tracks, smoke, and sound that conveyed information without a single word. Even the process of play carried hidden lessons: mimicry of adult movement, experimentation with tools, cautious exploration of new areas, all contributed to the accumulation of knowledge critical for survival. These children were both observers and participants, their lives a continuous negotiation between curiosity and caution, instinct and learned behavior. In every act, there was an imprint of guidance from those who had survived longer, those whose experience had distilled danger into comprehensible patterns. Yet even as they learned, the world continued to test them with sudden tremors, unexpected storms, and the occasional presence of enormous beasts whose movements and intentions could not be anticipated fully. Fear, in this context, was not terror, but a disciplined attentiveness, a mental calibration essential to endurance. They internalized the rhythm of hunting and gathering, the careful timing of movement and rest, the importance of maintaining warmth and energy, and the subtle cues that signaled imminent threat. And through all this, the children began to understand the value of collaboration and communication without words, relying on subtle shifts in posture, glance, and gesture to coordinate actions with others. Their understanding of the environment became deeply intuitive. Survival was woven into the texture of their consciousness. As seasons shifted, bringing snow, rain, and thaw, they adapted to the changing conditions, modifying strategies learned in prior months, transferring knowledge between each other in the quiet ritual of observation. Even their dreams, if dreams they had, were shaped by these lessons, echoing the rhythms of daily vigilance and the constant balance between risk and reward. They inherited a curriculum of shadows, of silence, of patience, of the ever-present tension between life and disappearance, learning that attention itself could be a protective shield. And in these early years, through the accumulation of observation, practice, and subtle imitation, the children were sculpted into the first true inheritors of a landscape that demanded constant respect, awareness, and adaptability, carrying forward the wisdom of those who had come before while slowly expanding the boundaries of what was known, possible, and survivable in a world that would not wait for the unprepared. They were learning not only to live, but to perceive, to anticipate, and to exist within the precarious weave of life and death that defined their time, their land, and the first chapters of what it meant to be human in a world that offered no forgiveness for inattention. And as they moved forward, carefully, silently, with hands and minds attuned to the environment, they carried with them not only survival, but the seeds of intuition, strategy, and human understanding that would echo across generations yet to come, forming a foundation upon which the story of humanity would slowly, cautiously begin to unfold. By the time the children reached an age where observation became instinct, their minds had already been trained to detect nuance in ways adults might overlook. The flicker of light against stone, the subtle shift of a shadow across a hollow, the almost imperceptible rustle of frozen leaves underfoot, all became signals encoded into memory, guiding movement and decision without conscious thought. They began to anticipate the behaviors of animals, tracking footprints, droppings, and disturbances in the snow or soil, understanding patterns of migration, feeding, and rest. Their curiosity, though tempered by the knowledge of risk, became a disciplined tool, guiding experiments with new techniques for foraging or tool-making while maintaining constant vigilance. Lessons were reinforced in cycles: repetition, observation, reflection, and cautious imitation. Even in moments of play or exploration, children were absorbing strategies for survival, internalizing sequences of cause and effect that might save life in unforeseen circumstances. They observed how elders coordinated tasks, shared resources, and communicated without sound, realizing the power of subtle gestures, positioning, and timing. Each interaction with the environment became a micro-lesson, a test of perception and judgment. They began to sense patterns in weather, the subtle signs of approaching storms, the movement of clouds across sky, the way wind shifted before snow fell or ice cracked. In this way, fear became a form of education, teaching anticipation rather than panic, attentiveness rather than alarm. They learned the balance between patience and action, when to wait, when to move, when to approach, and when to retreat. These lessons were not only physical, but social. Observation extended to peers, siblings, and elders, noticing their reactions, reading intention through posture, gesture, and timing. They understood the importance of cooperation in achieving goals that no individual could manage alone, tracking prey, gathering scarce resources, maintaining fire, and navigating treacherous terrain. Memory became intertwined with instinct. The landscape, the animals, and the social dynamics all converged into an internal guide for action. As the children grew, they began to engage in increasingly complex tasks under subtle supervision, setting rudimentary traps, fashioning tools with layered techniques, identifying edible versus poisonous plants, and choosing paths that minimized exposure to predators. Knowledge was cumulative, layered with the weight of observation, careful practice, and silent guidance from those who had survived the longest. The margin for error was minimal, and each mistake, however small, could have lasting consequences. Yet the children did not become paralyzed by fear. They became attuned to it, allowing it to sharpen cognition, heighten awareness, and direct attention to detail. Their understanding of danger became almost artistic in its precision, enabling rapid assessment of risk and the execution of actions that balanced survival with exploration. In this environment, imagination was not frivolous, but functional. Visualizing scenarios, predicting outcomes, and mentally rehearsing actions were essential skills that prepared them for the unpredictability of life in harsh conditions. Even sleep became a calculated moment of rest and alertness, a temporary suspension of vigilance that was carefully timed and spatially controlled within the safety of the cave or shelter. Through these disciplined practices, the children cultivated not only survival skills, but an early form of strategy and reasoning that would underlie complex behaviors in adulthood. Every small success reinforced attentiveness. Every narrow escape from danger solidified instinct. In this way, knowledge was not merely transferred but embodied, embedded into the structure of mind and movement, forming a foundation for foresight, collaboration, and the subtle understanding of both the natural and social world. By the end of these formative years, the children carried within them a profound awareness of the landscape, the creatures within it, and the rhythms of life and death that governed existence. They had internalized a language of signals, patterns, and cues invisible to untrained eyes. They had learned that the world was not chaotic but ordered, dangerous yet navigable, and that success depended on attentiveness, timing, and cooperation. Their memories and instincts intertwined, they became living archives of experience, capable of transmitting understanding through action, gesture, and subtle demonstration. These early lessons, encoded deeply in mind and body, would ripple outward, influencing not only their immediate survival, but the survival of the larger community, ensuring that knowledge passed quietly from generation to generation, shaping the trajectory of human life in a world that demanded both courage and caution in equal measure. And as they matured, these children, once acutely aware of every shadow, sound, and risk, emerged not merely as survivors, but as inheritors of a vast, silent curriculum, a blueprint of human adaptability, intuition, and the quiet endurance that had been honed over countless generations. By the time they were able to walk without guidance across the uneven terrain, the children's perception had been shaped into a subtle and precise instrument. They noticed the faint depression in the earth that marked where water had once pooled, the almost imperceptible changes in the coloration of moss that hinted at moisture levels, the distant silhouettes of mountains shifting as the sun moved across the sky. Each observation was catalogued silently, layered onto a memory that acted like an internal map, guiding every step with care and deliberation. Even the smallest sound, a branch snapping, the distant howl of a predator, the whisper of wind against rock, was meaningful, encoded into an understanding of when to advance, retreat, or remain still. Their early exposure to constant vigilance had transformed fear into a tool for awareness, their bodies responding instinctively to signals that the mind had already recognized and interpreted. Socially, they learned to read each other in subtle ways. A slight shift in posture, a glance, or a pause could communicate intention or warning without a single word. Cooperation was embedded deeply, not taught explicitly, and through shared action they were able to accomplish tasks no single child could manage alone. They tracked prey in coordinated efforts, gathered food from treacherous slopes, and maintained warmth around fire while keeping watch for unseen threats. Observation extended beyond immediate circumstances. They noticed the habits of animals, predicting migrations, feeding patterns, and seasonal movements. By understanding these rhythms, the children could anticipate both opportunity and danger. They also internalized the strategies of their elders, learning how to manipulate tools to improve efficiency, how to prepare materials for shelter and clothing, and how to manage limited resources across time. Even play became a practice of learning. Mimicking hunting sequences, testing traps, or exploring hidden crevices reinforced both skill and caution. Each experience contributed to an embodied knowledge that would be critical throughout life. Mistakes were instructive. A misstep on fragile ice or a misjudged approach toward a predator reinforced caution, teaching lessons that could not be conveyed through demonstration alone. The children's growing intuition allowed them to assess risk quickly and accurately, applying prior lessons to novel circumstances. In essence, their cognition was trained through a constant feedback loop of observation, action, consequence, and reflection. The environment itself became a teacher, and they learned to listen deeply to the language of wind, water, and movement. As they matured, they began to understand patterns beyond the immediate. Seasonal changes were read not only by temperature or snow accumulation, but by the presence of certain plants, the behavior of animals, and subtle changes in terrain. They could estimate distances to water sources, the timing of migration routes, and the likely presence of predators. Their planning incorporated these observations into strategies that allowed groups to thrive despite harsh conditions. Cultural understanding also emerged subtly. They recognized alliances and boundaries, the importance of proximity to elders, and the social rituals embedded in shared tasks and survival techniques. Language was still minimal, but communication occurred through gesture, eye contact, and shared movement, each child learning the syntax of action that conveyed intention and guidance. Through all these lessons, a quiet resilience took root. Even in moments of exhaustion or fear, the children had internalized strategies that allowed them to endure and adapt. Sleep, rest, and recovery were approached with calculated care, balancing the need for recuperation with the omnipresent threat of predators or environmental hazards. By adolescence, the children were not merely surviving, they were actively shaping their understanding of the landscape and the social group, integrating memory, intuition, and practiced skill into an almost seamless awareness of their surroundings. The lessons of childhood, absorbed in silence and repetition, allowed them to perceive danger, anticipate outcomes, and act with foresight that exceeded what mere instinct could provide. Every movement, glance, and breath was informed by the accumulation of experience, creating a mental framework that supported not only survival, but the capacity for innovation and adaptation. These early years, though shaped by fear and vigilance, were also a time of profound learning, laying the foundation for strategies, behaviors, and understanding that would be passed quietly to the next generation, ensuring continuity and survival in a world where attention, timing, and intuition were the greatest assets of all. As the children moved through successive seasons, the complexity of their understanding expanded, weaving together observations of terrain, climate, flora, fauna, and human interaction into an integrated framework of awareness. The frozen valleys taught patience, while the thawing rivers demonstrated caution and adaptation. Every stone, every tree, every shift in wind and weather became a lesson, a guide, a subtle teacher that imparted knowledge through consequence and repetition. They began to notice patterns in predator movement, recognizing not only the immediate threat, but the underlying behaviors that dictated hunting routes and territorial boundaries. This recognition allowed them to anticipate danger before it became imminent, a skill honed by constant observation and trial. Social learning grew increasingly sophisticated. The children could coordinate movement, share attention, and even predict the actions of their peers and elders. Collaboration became second nature, essential for tasks such as foraging, tracking, and managing fire, which were all fraught with hidden perils. Subtle cues, changes in posture, glance, or breathing, were understood instantly, allowing seamless cooperation without overt commands. Toolmaking, once simple and exploratory, became an exercise in precision. Chipping stone, sharpening edges, and combining materials demanded attention to detail, patience, and steady hands, skills reinforced through repeated practice under careful supervision. Each new technique built upon prior experience, layering knowledge in ways that allowed innovation while minimizing risk. Even in moments of play, the children practiced survival, testing hypotheses, exploring possibilities, and rehearsing responses to imagined threats. Their imagination was interwoven with practicality. Visualization became a means of anticipating outcomes, a rehearsal for real dangers. Fear, once raw and immediate, had transformed into a disciplined attentiveness. They recognized when the environment signaled change, when subtle shifts implied threat, and when opportunity was present. Memory became not only storage of events, but a predictive tool, guiding movement and decision-making. Sleep and rest were approached with an acute awareness of context. Positioning, surrounding shelter, and auditory cues all shaped patterns of relaxation and alertness. The rhythm of day and night, the waxing and waning of seasons, the migration of animals, and the behaviors of predators all informed strategy. Over time, intuition emerged as a natural extension of observation and learning, a subtle guide that allowed action without hesitation, calculated risk-taking, and rapid assessment of emergent threats. These children were accumulating not only practical skills, but a deep understanding of causality, consequence, and environmental interconnectivity. They could forecast outcomes based on past patterns, extrapolate from observation to strategy, and integrate multiple streams of sensory input into cohesive understanding. In essence, the curriculum of fear and attentiveness had evolved into mastery of perception. As they approached adolescence, their capacity for independent decision-making expanded. They could navigate treacherous terrain alone or in small groups, identify the presence of predators or rival groups at a distance, and anticipate challenges before they emerged. Coordination of group activity became intuitive, guided by internalized cues and shared memory, reinforcing trust and cooperation. Knowledge was cumulative, layered in ways that made each individual a repository of information vital to community survival. Even subtle errors offered instructive lessons, refining judgment and sharpening perception. By the time these children were considered mature enough to fully participate in adult roles, they had internalized the environment, its dangers, and its hidden signals so deeply that survival and adaptation were instinctive. Every action, every glance, every gesture was informed by years of careful observation, attentive mimicry, and disciplined practice. They became living compendiums of survival, intuition, and foresight, carrying within them a curriculum that no spoken language could fully capture, yet which defined their capacity to endure, adapt, and shape the world around them. In this way, the children of the Neanderthal world embodied a profound synthesis of vigilance, learning, and adaptability, a heritage of attentiveness that ensured the continuity and resilience of their communities across generations, silently preparing them for challenges that would arise long after the lessons of childhood had been learned. By the time they reached full adolescence, the children's perception had become almost preternatural, an extension of the landscape itself. Each step was measured, each glance deliberate, each breath attuned to the subtle shifts in air, scent, and sound that marked danger or opportunity. They could detect the faint tremor of an approaching predator through vibrations in the ground, the whispered movement of distant flocks, or the subtle rustle of leaves that indicated human activity far beyond their immediate view. Their understanding of risk was layered, informed not only by immediate sensory input, but by the accumulated wisdom of countless previous experiences internalized over years of careful observation. Even the rhythms of the seasons were anticipated with remarkable accuracy. They could predict the formation of ice, the movement of water, and the migration of animals, adjusting behavior and strategy accordingly. Tool use had evolved beyond simple functionality into sophisticated sequences of preparation and execution. Stones were selected, shaped, and sharpened with intention. Hides were prepared, stretched, and arranged to maximize warmth and protection. Fire was managed to provide heat, light, and a focal point for observation without attracting unnecessary attention. Social strategies had become equally refined. The children could coordinate with peers silently, read subtle cues from elders, and anticipate group needs without spoken instruction. The integration of individual skill into collective action became seamless, a choreography of survival that relied on intuition as much as learned technique. Mistakes, though less frequent, remained instructive. Each miscalculation was analyzed internally, every near miss transformed into an invisible map of caution and response. Memory, attention, and foresight fused, creating an ability to act decisively in moments of high tension, where hesitation could mean disaster. Even emotions were shaped by this environment. Fear was not paralyzing, but clarifying. Excitement tempered by calculation. Curiosity balanced against the omnipresent need for vigilance. By combining these elements, sensory acuity, learned behavior, intuition, social coordination, and emotional regulation, the children developed a cognitive architecture uniquely suited to the demands of their world. Imagination remained a tool,
used to simulate potential threats and test strategies mentally before acting. This mental rehearsal allowed rapid adaptation to novel situations, reinforcing survival instincts while expanding problem-solving capabilities. The landscape, once threatening in its raw immediacy, became a canvas upon which they could read, interpret, and anticipate. Knowledge of the environment was not abstract. It was embodied, present in posture, gait, and reflex. The children could sense shifts in wind that hinted at changes in weather, subtle traces of predator movement in snow or mud, and even minute changes in vegetation that indicated the presence of water or food. They had become acute observers, capable of processing multiple layers of input simultaneously and translating them into coherent, actionable understanding. By adulthood, these lessons culminated in a profound mastery of both self and environment. The children had internalized a curriculum written not in words, but in experience, practice, and observation, a deep, intuitive comprehension of life in a world where every detail mattered. Their capacity for foresight, collaboration, and adaptation ensured that survival was not merely reactive but proactive, guided by understanding, attention, and anticipation. They emerged as inheritors of a body of knowledge that transcended individual experience, carrying forward the wisdom of generations in each glance, movement, and decision. In the quiet attention, disciplined observation, and careful interaction that characterized their early lives, the Neanderthal children acquired not only the skills necessary for survival, but the foundation for strategic thinking, foresight, and collective intelligence. Through this process, the threads of human adaptability were woven, ensuring that knowledge, resilience, and the nuanced understanding of the environment would endure across generations, quietly preparing them for the challenges that lay ahead in an ever-changing, unforgiving world. As the children moved beyond the immediate lessons of survival, their awareness began to extend into abstract understanding, connecting the rhythms of nature with the cycles of life within their community. They noticed how seasons influenced the behavior of animals, how changes in weather affected plant growth, and how the migration of flocks could signal both opportunity and danger. Each observation became part of an internal library of patterns, allowing them to anticipate environmental shifts with remarkable precision. The world, once chaotic and unpredictable, revealed itself as a network of cause and effect, and their actions could now be guided by this subtle comprehension. They refined their tool-making skills into complex sequences, learning to combine materials in ways that enhanced durability, efficiency, and adaptability. Stones were selected not only for shape, but for density and fracture pattern. Wood was carved to optimize grip and leverage. Hides were treated to improve insulation and flexibility. Fire, once a simple necessity, became a carefully managed resource, controlled to provide warmth, light, and protection, while minimizing smoke that could attract predators. Social dynamics within their group evolved with equal sophistication. The children developed an intuitive understanding of hierarchy, cooperation, and conflict resolution. Silent cues, posture, eye contact, and gesture, allowed coordination without distraction or miscommunication, enabling the group to perform complex tasks efficiently. They began to anticipate the needs of others, sharing resources or providing subtle warnings, reinforcing bonds that ensured mutual survival. Exploration and play continued to serve as mechanisms of learning. Children tested boundaries, experimented with new approaches to tool use, and simulated hunting or foraging strategies, all while refining judgment and decision-making. Their imagination, far from being frivolous, functioned as an extension of foresight, allowing them to mentally model possible outcomes before acting. Mistakes remained critical components of learning, each failure informing the next decision, each near miss embedding caution, strategy, and resilience. The accumulation of experience transformed into intuition. They could read subtle environmental signals, a faint disturbance in soil, the angled bend of a branch, a fleeting shadow across rock, and predict outcomes without hesitation. Memory and perception fused to create a continuous feedback loop, guiding action with precision and minimizing risk. Emotional regulation was equally vital. Fear sharpened perception, curiosity guided exploration, and the desire for play or reward was tempered by the practical necessity of vigilance. Through disciplined attention and repeated practice, the children developed the capacity to act decisively under pressure, maintaining clarity and composure in moments that could determine life or death. They learned to negotiate the delicate balance between caution and opportunity, instinct and learned knowledge, independence and group cohesion. By adolescence, the children had internalized a framework of cognition, perception, and social understanding that would allow them to operate effectively in even the most challenging environments. Their skill set encompassed environmental mastery, tactical foresight, refined motor abilities, and social coordination, all acquired quietly through observation, repetition, and subtle instruction. Even sleep, rest, and recovery were approached strategically, ensuring that mental and physical faculties remained sharp while minimizing exposure to potential dangers. This comprehensive development created a generation capable not merely of surviving, but of actively shaping their environment, making informed decisions, and transmitting accumulated knowledge to subsequent generations. They became conduits for the subtle wisdom of those who had preceded them, integrating experience with instinct, observation with action, and individual understanding with communal practice. In doing so, the children laid the groundwork for a continuum of human adaptability, ensuring that lessons learned in silence and vigilance would echo forward, forming the basis of survival, strategy, and understanding in a world that demanded both respect and mastery. By the time they reached the threshold of full maturity, the children's accumulated knowledge had transformed them into beings capable of nuanced perception, strategic foresight, and profound understanding of both environment and social dynamics. Every action was informed by layered experience. Every glance could anticipate movement or threat, and every gesture communicated intention with precision. Their mastery of terrain allowed them to navigate forests, valleys, and icy plains with an almost instinctive awareness of potential hazards, resources, and opportunities. The skills honed over years of careful observation, repetition, and subtle guidance ensured not only personal survival, but the cohesion and effectiveness of their entire group. Hunting, gathering, and resource management were executed with fluid coordination. Each individual acted as an extension of communal knowledge, responding instantly to cues from the landscape and the actions of peers. Tool use reached its pinnacle of sophistication. Stones were shaped with meticulous care, edges refined for efficiency, and composite tools created to perform tasks that required both strength and finesse. Fire was managed with strategic intent, providing warmth, light, and protection, while minimizing exposure to danger. The children had internalized the rhythms of life so completely that anticipation became second nature. They recognized subtle changes in wind, cloud formations, animal behavior, and vegetation, allowing them to predict environmental shifts, locate water sources, and identify safe pathways before threats materialized. Socially, they had developed the ability to coordinate, communicate, and support one another through silent observation and shared memory. They understood group hierarchy, the importance of cooperation, and the unspoken rules that maintained balance within the community. Even moments of exploration or play were harnessed as opportunities to refine judgment, test strategies, and strengthen bonds, embedding practical knowledge in every activity. The combination of environmental awareness, refined motor skill, and social intelligence created a holistic competence that defined their survival and their adaptability. Memory and intuition fused seamlessly. Knowledge was not simply recalled, but enacted, anticipated, and applied in real time, allowing the children to respond effectively to unexpected challenges. Emotional regulation complemented these skills, ensuring that fear heightened awareness rather than paralyzing action, that curiosity led to productive exploration, and that social instincts reinforced cooperation and cohesion.
Through these formative experiences, the children became carriers of a knowledge system that transcended individual experience, embodying the cumulative lessons of previous generations while simultaneously generating insights that would be passed forward. They had internalized the delicate balance between caution and exploration, instinct and strategy, independence and collaboration. Every step, every glance, every decision was informed by an intricate web of understanding that extended beyond the immediate moment into the realm of foresight and anticipation. By adulthood, they emerged as fully capable participants in a world that demanded constant vigilance, adaptability, and cooperation. Their accumulated wisdom was not codified in language, but embedded in perception, action, and social cohesion, a living archive of survival, strategy, and human ingenuity. In the quiet attention of their early years, the repeated lessons of observation, imitation, and careful trial had sculpted a generation capable of thriving within an unforgiving environment, able to anticipate threats, seize opportunities, and maintain the delicate balance necessary for life to persist. These children, once novices in the language of the land, now carried forward a legacy of attentiveness, resilience, and insight, ensuring that the knowledge of survival, the capacity for foresight, and the subtle understanding of both environment and community would endure, shaping not only their own lives, but the trajectory of human adaptation for generations yet to come. And in this continuum, the story of humanity quietly expanded, written not in words, but in the attentive gestures, careful movements, and patient observations of those who walked the land long before us, reminding us that the foundation of our species' endurance lies in the intimate and disciplined engagement of children, learning to see, understand, and navigate a world that demands both respect and mastery.